Shalom. And I want to start off by giving all the praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Wachech, Chodesh. Double honors to my teachers, the apostles, and elders, a great millstone, and salutations to you, Akim, that's out there listening. Pushing for this word with truth and sincerity, and your few Akwat as well. That's listening with sincerity. All right, today, just coming back at you guys through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai. And it's going to be a fairly quick lesson. And also, I'm the brother Machaya from the camp GMS Montreal. And like I stated, this is going to be a fairly quick lesson on how that we have to apply what we teach and preach. Okay, because that's part of this truth as well, man. No, you got to practice what you preach. Okay, so let's read this in the book of Sirach 37 and verse 19. It says, "There is one that is wise and teacheth many, and yet is unprofitable to himself." Yes, here it is, the Lord bestowed us with this wisdom, this heavenly knowledge, and we know all these breakdowns, all these precepts on how to be brotherly and how to be an Israelite, this, that, the third. But here it is. Yeah, you make videos to teach about these things, but sometimes you may not be applying it. You got to remember to apply your teachings, man. Okay, you can't be unprofitable to yourself here. You're good at giving advice. You're good at, showing the congregation what this is and what this is and what to do in this situation and what not to do. And then when the Lord puts you in that situation, whatever it may be, here it is, you're not applying what you were taught. It is not to be so, man. Okay, we have to practice what we preach. Okay, it can be no hypocrite. Okay, because the Lord does not like hypocrites, man. Here it is, you say to do this, but when the time comes for you to do it, you don't do it. That's being a hypocrite, man. Okay, and the Lord does not like hypocrites. Okay, let's get this one as well in the book of Romans, the 2nd chapter. All right, because they say it's easy to say something, and say to do this, to do that. But, what really matters is you doing it yourself too. Okay. That's why sometimes, if a certain topic comes up and then you don't know anything about it, or you didn't do it yourself, let's say if someone's asking you for advice, it's best not to say anything, or just say, I don't know, rather than, say, oh, do this, do that, because, this, that, the third. But you don't know anything about the topic. You don't know anything about the subject. Okay, you never been through that experience. Experience is a teacher. Okay, the word wisdom, when you go to the definition, it goes into experience. You see? So let's read this. Romans, the 2nd chapter, and verse 21. It says, "Thou therefore teachest another, teachest thou not thyself?" Yeah, even when we make these lessons, we be edifying ourselves too. I remember Apostle Gabar made that statement, when he makes lesson, he's teaching himself at the same time. Because sometimes the Spirit might make you bring out a certain point on a particular precept that you never seen before. You're like, oh shit, yo, that's new. And right there you learn that on the fly. So when we make these lessons, we're teaching ourselves at the same time too. And you could go back and watch your own lessons. And you will get edified. Sometimes you'll be making a lesson, you think, oh, I don't know if this lesson is going to be edifying, man, as you're doing it. And then, you go back and watch that lesson, you realize, oh, I was in the Spirit. That was actually an edifying lesson, man. You thought yourself, right? Like the scripture is saying. Let's read that again. Romans 2 and verse 21, it says, "Thou therefore which teachest another, teachest thou not thyself? Thou that preachest a man should not steal, dost thou steal? Thou that sayest a man should not commit adultery, dost thou commit adultery? Thou that abhorrest idols, dost thou commit sacrilege?" In other words, are you being a hypocrite? Okay, if you're teaching, don't do this, don't commit adultery, okay, don't steal, are you stealing? Because if you are, then you're not a good teacher. Because a teacher leads by example, teaches by example. Okay, because currently in this walk of ours, the Lord is grooming us to be leaders as well. We are indeed teachers and prophets, but at the same time, we're being groomed to be leaders. leaders of the nation. So certain things that we say, we have to put into practice. Because trust me, man, the congregation is watching what you're doing, watching your movements, okay? Or the people that you're giving advice to, or whatever, they're watching how you conduct yourself, how you're behaving, you know? So we got to apply these things that we teach. It says, verse 23, thou that makest thy boast of the law, through breaking the law, dishonest thou the Most High. Yeah, so just don't be a hypocrite, man. Matter of fact, let's look up that word hypocrite in the etymology. Okay. So this is hypocrite in the etymology online. Okay, it says false pretender to virtue or religion. You see, you're a false pretender. You might be sincere. You might be sincere by your advice. You might be, hey, mass majority of the time, you are sincere about certain things, but, do you apply it? And if you don't, then you're being a false pretender to virtue or religion, man. Because the person you give that advice to, you're like, okay, yeah, surely he did this himself, so that's why he's saying it with that certain boldness. So I'm going to listen to him and take his advice. But here it is, you're presented with the same situation, and you don't apply your own advice. That's not good. Okay, it says a hypocrite. It says from Greek, hypokrites. It says stage actor, pretender, dissembler. Don't be a stage actor, man. We're not actors in this. Okay, we're here to live an honest and virtuous lifestyle, not being actors. Okay, these false prophets, these false leaders, they're set in place to be actors. Okay, we're here to be honest men. Okay, men of integrity. All right, being a man of your word. That's another thing, because here in Babylon, that's not taught. To be a man of your word. Most people, they say something, and then they don't stand by what they say. So us we have to stand by what we say, man. And not backpedal on your words, man. You have to be like the man, Salakia. You have to be like the Most High, right? The Most High is a man of his word. It says scripture say how that he puts his word above his name. And here it is, we're trying to be fashioned like him, to have the same mind as him. So, hey, we got to apply these things as well, So let's go back. I want to get this as well, because all of this is also part of you examining yourself too, because trust me, man, a lot of things that you say, and then when the situation presents itself, it's like you get put on the spot, and you got to remember your teachings. You got to remember what you were taught, man. Once again, all of these, they come with experience. So let's read this 2 Corinthians 13 and verse 5. It says, examine yourself whether you be in the faith. Prove your own selves. Know ye not your own selves, how that Yahushua Mashiach is in you, except you be reprobates. Okay, so we got to examine ourselves, and see what needs to be applied. And especially when it comes to you saying something, even when it comes to rebuke too, that too, when it comes to rebuke as well, you gotta analyze yourself and see, did I do this too? So how should I rebuke this brother or this sister upon this particular topic? Okay, because even Yahushua, he spoke about that. Let's get that in the book of Matthew 7. Okay, Yahushua spoke about that. When you're judging, you got to make sure that you yourself, you're straight, you're applying that judgment to yourself first, in a sense. So let's read this. This is Matthew 7 and verse 1. It says, judge not, that ye be not judged. For with what judgment ye judge, ye shall be judged, and with what measure ye meet, ye shall be measured to you again. Okay, so Yahushua was not saying that we're not allowed to judge. Yes, you are. But you got to make sure that the judgment that you're applying, that, let's say, if you're presented with that situation, it's going to be applied to you too. So you got to make sure that, hey, you're analyzing things and see, am I being a hypocrite? Did I do this and I didn't apply this judgment I'm giving to this person? That's all it means. Because once again, we're being groomed to be leaders, to be judges, Judging is part of this ministry. Okay? The apostle in the book of Corinthians, he said that don't you know that you're gonna judge angels? How much more the affairs that pertain to this life? Judgment is part of the scriptures, man. So don't believe these Christians, oh, you can't judge, don't judge me. The Lord Christ saved me by his blood. Nah, it doesn't work like that. If you're going off, there's judgment that's going to be cast. Okay? Verse 3, it says, for why behold this thou the mote that is in thy brother's eye, but considerest not the beam that is in thine own eye? Yes, here it is, you're quick to say, yo, brother, you're going off, man. Where's this, that, the third? But here it is, you have a whole beam in your eye, man. Here it is, your tongue that is way off. So you got to make sure that you're straight. Like it's going to say in verse 4, it says, or how wilt thou say to thy brother, let me pull out the mote that is in thine eye, the mote of thine eye, and behold, a beam is in thine own eye. Thou hypocrite, first cast out the beam that is in thine own eye, and then shalt thou see clearly to cast out the mote that is the mote out of thy brother's eye. And that's just straight facts. Don't be a hypocrite. Hey, first, like we read in 2 Corinthians 13:5, examine yourself. And then, you could cast your judgment and say, okay, you're going off on this, that, the third. This is what you're supposed to do. Okay? Because a lot of times, let's say if you have men under you or whatnot, right? They're going off a lot of times based upon, according to your example. They're watching your movements to see, what did he do? Let me do that too. So it's just a thing of you gotta be circumspect and just make sure you're applying what you teach. It's another thing to say it, but it's another thing to apply it. And when it counts is when the Lord presents you with situations. And then you gotta remember your teaching is just okay, this is what I have to do. But that was basically it, man. This was my spirit. I figured put it on the tube. Lord willing, this was edifying. All right. So I'm gonna close it off here, begging all the praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai Bahashem Wachachodesh. Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. Until next time, I'm gonna say Shalom.